Today's session is on job descriptions, how to build them in TouchStone, as well as how to use them as an effective management tool. So I'm going to first discuss technically how the job descriptions come together in TouchStone and how the functions work on that screen, and then we'll talk about how to actually use them, which is the whole point. And then we'll get into the process of the week, which is related to using job descriptions. So in the first session, we talked about the importance of building your 4 functions list first. So coming up with a list of all the processes that you need in all of the 4 functions. So not necessarily going in and creating all the documentation right away, but at least going through the exercise of coming up with this list or some list like it, just identifying what the process titles are. Then last week we discussed building an organization chart. So after the 4 functions list is done, coming and building your organization chart. We discussed the importance of building this for the future so that it's a strategy tool, so that you're planning for where your business is going and not necessarily just what's happening right now. Once you've accomplished that, you've got a nice organization chart set, then the next step in TouchStone is to build all the job descriptions for every position on the chart. Now, if you've done your 4 functions list, the building of the job descriptions is very simple in TouchStone, because all that's happening is we're linking processes from the 4 functions list to these boxes on the chart. We're assigning accountability for all of these processes over here to the appropriate positions that are responsible for that work. This is how TouchStone gets organized really nicely and how it all comes together, how the tools come together. You have your master list in the 4 functions by subject area. You have all the positions on your org chart, all the employees, and then you marry the 2 by linking processes to boxes on the chart, which creates the job description for that position. So this is what a job description looks like when it's fully built. It's a listing of all the processes. Every one of these processes is in the 4 functions list in one place or another. And if you select the process, you can always see from this breadcrumb trail where it lives in the 4 functions list. In addition, you can click this icon called Link to Job Description right on the process page, and you can see which job descriptions it's been linked to. You can also link it and unlink it from this screen. So if I want to unlink a process, I just select this position, and now it's off that job description. If I want to link it back, I choose that position, choose Strategic or Tactical Section, and hit Link, and now it's back on. So when you select the process from the job description, number 1, it takes you to all the content for how that work is done. Number 2, you can see where it lives on the 4 functions list if you need to. And number 3, you can see all the job descriptions that it's on. So let's go back to the organization chart. So if someone's asking a question about printing of the org chart, I'll just answer that really quickly. The tree view, which is what we're in now, can be printed by clicking this little printer icon. And you need to adjust it depending on how big your screen is. So this is not a perfect printing solution in tree view. It's kind of, you have to print it in pieces if it's a large chart. Another way you can print in tree view is to take a screen capture of the org chart and then open it like in Microsoft Paint or in another like Photoshop program, and then you can print it from there. The easiest way is to put it into simple view and then print, because then you can print it, on one sheet of paper, and if it's longer than one sheet, then you have multiple sheets. Okay, so let's go back. So this is a job description. When it's fully built, this is what it will look like. The job description's got 2 sections to it. There's strategic processes and there's tactical processes. So strategic processes are defined as strategy, managerial, guiding the business type work. This is our definition. How you decide to define your strategic processes versus your tactical is completely up to you. But as we define them, these strategic processes are strategy work, development, oversight, managerial work, getting results through other people, typically things that are done by a manager. So the strategic processes on a managerial job description there's going to be quite a few. Mostly should be strategic and less tactical. Tactical processes are the technical work. What's common on a non-managerial position like this one is that you may have all tactical processes and no strategic processes. So technical or tactical positions have very little strategic, mostly tactical, whereas managerial positions have mostly strategic and less tactical. These strategic processes tend to come from the guiding the business function in TouchStone. Not exclusively, but generally all the processes that are in the guiding the business function would be put on in the strategic section of a job description. So I'm going to go here and build a position. So I'm just adding a position to the org chart, telling TouchStone which box to put it under. We'll put it under President. So here's the new position. When I select it, it takes me to the job description. So this job description is blank. It hasn't been built yet. And if you haven't built yours, this is what yours will look like as well. First thing, if you want to edit the title of the position, you just select it. So it's all click to edit here. So I can change the title of this position just by selecting it and typing in the new title. Underneath the title, we have this section called the objective. So this is the purpose of the position. It's usually a sentence or a phrase which says, why does this position exist? What is it here to do? If you want it to be a paragraph, that's fine. It's completely up to you. But one thing is, don't start describing the work that the position does, because that belongs in the processes itself. So kind of stay high level with it. And what is the mission? What is the purpose of this position? It's really useful for employees to know that. Like, what is their overall result that they're trying to achieve? Like for a salesperson, to convert qualified leads. So that is their overall purpose. Next step is to add the processes that this position is accountable for from the 4 functions list. So how we do that is we go where it says add existing process, and it's called existing because it lives in the 4 functions list. So it's already existing in TouchStone. So I choose this icon. Now I'm asked, do I want it in the strategic or the tactical section? So you'd start maybe by building the strategic first, if there's any strategic processes, and then you can go back and flip to tactical and put them in the tactical section. When I hit this drop-down, I'm looking at all my sub-functions from the 4 functions list. So this is giving me kind of a link to the 4 functions list to all of the processes. So I'd start by choosing the sub-function that the position's accountable for. So usually, based on where it is on the org chart, you can tell which sub-function the work of that position is going to be in. Choose a process that I want to link, and then I hit Save. And now TouchStone's just linked this process from the 4 functions list over here to this position. Then I could go back and do this tactical section. So if this is a salesperson, say, I would probably go right to the sales sub-function. You could literally look through every one and just analyze it and say, is there anything in here? No. Go to the next one. Is there anything in here? But usually you'll go right to the subject area where the work lies of that position. I can choose one process, or I can hit my control key down and choose all of them at one time, or skip. Once I'm happy with what I've selected, I hit Save, and then TouchStone links all those processes I chose to this position. So you can see why, if you've done the 4 functions list first, at least you've listed out the titles, when you go to build the job descriptions, it's super easy. You just click, 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 link, and the job description is built. So the act of building all of the job descriptions for every position on your org chart can happen quite quickly once you've got your 4 functions list done. Once the job description has been completed, it becomes this really effective management tool. It also organizes the processes in this list here by who's accountable for them. which is a great thing to have as well, because once that happens, you really probably just go right to the org chart. You'll be able to see all the processes related to that position, and then you can start in on the documentation of each position. You can drag and drop on the screen, so you can drag from the strategic to the taxable section and vice versa. Another way to do that is if you select the process and you go link to job description. Again, I'm seeing the job descriptions that this has been linked to, and I could take it off this and add it back, and then that lets me put it in a different section as well. Once you've built your job descriptions, if you're looking at it and you say, oh, wow, we missed a process here. Like there's more to just this, there's a process that we forgot from the 4 functions list that needs to be on this position. A quick way to add it is to go to this icon here where it says Add New Process. So here you type in the name of the process. Then you're going to tell TouchStone, I can't spell today. Then you're going to tell TouchStone where to put it on the 4 functions list. So I'm going to hit the drop down here, and I'm seeing all my sub-functions. So even though I'm adding this process directly to this job description, TouchStone's still making me put it on the 4 functions list, because that 4 functions list is a master list of everything. So it's always going to store it there as well as putting it on the job description. So I choose the sub-function that this process is related to that I'm about to add, and then I hit Save. And so now I've just added this process directly to this job description, but when I select it, as you can see, it's here on the 4 functions list as well. Now when you add a process, it's always a good idea to go in and define it. So put in the objective of the process. So you'll see like here, daily sales to-do list, to be completed by sales personnel by 5 p.m. each day. So it's giving you like what we call the objective, the purpose of the position. Usually it's a sentence or a phrase. So if you notice, once you've built your job descriptions, if you notice any of your processes that haven't been defined, there is no objective like this one, go and define it. Just put in the purpose, the objective. This just allows you and anyone else who's looking at it to be able to see what's in this process. What is it here for? When you define it, it gives you the scope of the process as well. So it tells you where, in a sense, what's to be accomplished within it. So that helps anyone looking at it to know how it's used. But more importantly, if the process isn't documented yet, whoever goes to document it is going to be able to see what's supposed to be in it. So someone's asking a question, how do you locate any processes which have not been linked to a job description? This is a great question. We're in our spring release, we're going to be having new report features, and that's like a report that is going to come where you can just click Run Report, and then it will tell you all processes that haven't been linked to job descriptions. But a quick and easy way, well, it's not necessarily quick because it takes about a couple seconds per process, but one of the things I always recommend is after you've built all your job descriptions on the org chart, so you've gone through and got link, 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 boom, they're all been created, you then go to your 4 functions list and go through every process. Look at it. Go link to job description, make sure it's on the right job descriptions. Make sure you haven't forgotten to put it on one. Make sure it's not been put on one that it's not supposed to be on. Close, hit the back button, go to the next process. Link to job description. So you can see it takes like maybe 5 seconds a process to do this. But it's a good exercise because, number one, you're looking at every process again and you're asking yourself, is this valid? Is this something we're going to use and document? And is it on all the right job descriptions? But there is a report that's going to be coming soon that will do that kind of more in a, in a global way. And then we'll have links to the process, so you can select the process that it hasn't been linked and you can link it. The black X on this screen will allow you to remove processes from a job description. So if you select this black X, you're going to see these little remove buttons, and you can click remove, okay, and it takes it off the job description. So you want to, if you want to remove a process from a job description, all it's doing is removing it. That's why we use the word remove. If it's not deleting it, the process still lives on the 4 functions list. So I can take any of these processes off this job description, but I'm not deleting them from TouchStone. It's still here on the 4 functions list. Another way to remove a process is obviously to go to this link to job description button again, and then you'll see which job description is on, and one click it removes it. So either way, you can remove it from the face of the job description, or you can go to the process itself and remove it. The export arrow on the job description screen will allow you to print and export like all the other areas in TouchStone, so print to Word, PDF, or email. But in addition, you have this function called Print Operating Manual or Print Operating Manual to Word. So what this function does is it prints the job description, which is like a table of contents for the operating manual, and then it prints all the tools inside of every process. So it's going to export those all into a Word document, and then you can wrap it up in a PDF if you want, and then you've got an external operating manual for the position. Some people need external operating manuals because, maybe you have certain positions that don't have access to computers and you want to send it home for them to study, or you just want a hard copy version. But having said that, I think it's always good to think twice before you print anything, because the minute you print it, or the minute you even export it and save it to your network, now you've got a different copy of this. So you've got another version, you might say. And part of the value of TouchStone is learning how to adopt kind of a paperless, up-to-date, real-time environment for all of your documentation. One of the reasons to have a system like TouchStone is so that you get away from having duplicates, having multiple versions of your documentation. So rather than exporting things, create a read-only user so that that person can log into TouchStone and see the documentation. Rather than printing things to get feedback on it, rather email links or email the tools themselves. If I go and copy this URL up here at the top, and then I stick this in an email to someone and say, hey, look at this job description and let me know what you think, as long as they're logged into TouchStone, if they insert that link, it's going to take them to that job description so that you can point exactly to what you want them to look at and see without having to print it or export it. All right. So here's a few kind of tips on job descriptions, and then we're going to get into like how you use job descriptions. If I have a managerial position here, and it's got all the managerial work, the work of the manager, and then I've got these subordinate positions below, which is the sales and the marketing work. When I'm building this job description, I'm not going to put the work of these positions on it. So I've seen people do this before because the theory is if you're the manager, you have to make sure that the employees that you're responsible for get their work done. And you need to know how to do that work yourself. So they want to put all those processes on this job description. First thing it does is it kind of overloads that job description and makes it almost unmanageable when you've got like the whole getting the business process list on this job description. So instead of doing that, put only the work of the manager. It's implied that as the manager's responsibility is to ensure that all these positions get their results. The manager will always have access to the processes on these 3 job descriptions. In fact, they'll be building them and innovating them if they're doing it, if you're doing it well. So it's implied. You're the manager. You ensure that all the work of these positions is done. If this person ever needs to fill in for any of these boxes, or let's say your business is growing and this isn't, you can't afford for this to be a full-time position yet, so your manager also does sales, then they have 2 job descriptions. They have this one and this one. So don't fold it together and kind of make it people dependent and for the short term. Continue to think towards the future, have the managerial job description, and then this position fills this box as well. Everything is drag and drop on this screen, so you notice I'm pulling it up and pulling it down. A good thing to do once the job descriptions are built is to put these in order of priority, all of the processes. So what you want developed first, second, third, and reorder them. At that point, once the job descriptions are built, it's a great time to start in on the documentation. So you can think about which positions are the biggest priority. You can think about who to delegate to. So if you haven't gotten any employees involved in the documentation yet, this is a great time to do it because every single job description has been built and the processes have been identified. So I can say, okay, service manager, I want you to go to TouchStone, go to your job description. Your processes are in order of priority, start documenting. You can even go to the position, or the manager can, and say, okay, well, this referral development is the most important one to do first. I can go to the title of the process. I can put in a little due date, the date that you want the first draft done, and save it. So now when the person goes to look at this job description, they're going to see the very first process that they're supposed to document and the due date when it's supposed to be due. So this is like a way of doing project management with the documentation right inside of TouchStone. There's no reason to create like external spreadsheets with big lists of the processes and people's names, and do it all in TouchStone. It forces people into TouchStone, which is what you want. You want them to use it. So they go right to the job description, they see what they're working on, they go and they put in a due date, you know when it's due, they know when it's due. When they're finished with the documentation of it, they can go and remove the date. And this one's already been marked as complete, but you would mark it as complete, this one's done, and then they go on to the next one. All right, let's talk about how to use job descriptions, because that's really the point of all of this. The point isn't just to get the documentation done. The point is to actually use it. I think job descriptions, to a certain degree, kind of get a bad rap because they're not very useful in their normal form. So lots of job descriptions that I see from people who are just starting to use TouchStone, they're like hiring documents. They're very subjective and vague. They may be useful when you go to hire a position because it's got sometimes even qualifications and minimum requirements. It's got an idea of the work that's supposed to be done. But it's really kind of an elusive, subjective document. The job descriptions in TouchStone are very practical. They're realistic. They're usable. So if I have a salesperson like here, rather than having qualities and qualifications and a wish list of what I hope they'll be like, this is more direct. You're really taking ownership of what you want this position to do and learn. Every process is the work that they're supposed to do, and then ultimately within that is complete step-by-step set of instructions on how they do it. So I'm not just saying to this salesperson, I'm hiring you and you need to generate referrals. And then I get mad when they've been employed for 2 months and I don't have any referrals. This is much more clear and concrete. I say your job is to generate referrals, and within this is the set of instructions on how to do that. The processes can help manage the employee. So you can create things like this, a daily sales to-do list. And then every day the salesperson goes through and checks off that they have done certain processes or items that they're supposed to do that day on a regular basis. You can take qualities that you desire in the employee or in the manager and really make those into concrete processes that you can train the employee on. So this one, for example, rather than just having a work item on a job description that says, make good decisions, or be a leader, I love that one, or manage the department. So vague, right? Well, how do you manage the department? Well, hopefully, maybe they come with experience and can do that, but you're never going to get your expectations met unless you have a real process for it. So rather than saying, make good decisions, act like a leader, create a process on decision making. Create a process on being a leader. Create multiple processes on how to manage the department. So any of you that have current job descriptions, see if you can pick those apart and look at every work item or everything that you have listed and decide, do you really want to own that or not? And if the answer is yes, then you need to develop a process for it so that when you bring those people on, you say, this is how you act like a leader. Follow this process. This is what I want you to learn. This is how you make good decisions. Here's this matrix. Here's a to-do list. Here's a SWOT analysis. We want you to use this. This is how you do good sales follow-up. This is how you generate referrals, and I know it because I've got 5 other people doing it right now, and they all generate referrals and convert them at 50%. So there's real power in that. So these job descriptions become these ways of not only training the employees and retraining them, but it also becomes a way that a manager can manage the employee. So an effective manager learns how to manage the process by which employees get results. If I have a process in place and I can train an employee on it and I manage them to that process, it gives me a real way to quantify and measure the success of that employee. It eliminates all of the people and personalities and all of the ups and downs of emotional things that come with trying to manage employees. All of that's going to still exist to a certain degree, but as a manager, I'm not just trying to pretend that the employee knows how to do it or wishing that they could or being disappointed when they don't. I really have confidence that I can delegate something to them and I know that it works. And if they don't make it work and we can't make it work together, then they're not right for the position. So it gives you a lot of control as a manager. So these job descriptions become a way for the manager to go through with the employee on a regular basis what it is that they're responsible for. So a process I want to talk about, I'm going to talk about 2 processes from the library, but a process I want to talk about which is helps make job descriptions an effective management tool is the employee one-on-one meeting process. So this is in the library right here in the Guiding the Business function, and I've got it in my account right here. This is simply a process where a manager learns how to guide and manage an employee with processes. So all it involves is meeting with the employee on a regular basis and discussing their job description with them, discussing the processes and how they're doing in them and with them. So this, we recommend once a week. You know, I do a little bit of management here now, but years ago I was a manager for over 10 years. And we did a similar process where we met once a week. Now I have like regular employees where maybe the meeting's like 20 minutes, maybe it's 30 minutes. There were some where it was once every other week. The frequency should be enough that you can engage and have regular communication, but it doesn't have to be so much that it's, you know, difficult. I think meetings get a bad rap to a certain degree because they're not effective and there's no structure to them. But these meetings are should be very clear and precise on what needs to be accomplished in the meeting. So all this process is a way or guidelines on how to have a meeting. So you can decide on the frequency. There's even this little scheduler down here, the scheduler form, where you can put the employee's name in and then plan out the meetings for the month or even for the year. These can get plugged into an Outlook calendar or whatever you have eventually, but it's good to kind of think through every employee, especially the manager's not used to doing this, and then planning out when they're going to meet, and what times and how often. Then it's got this little agenda form down here. So the agenda form is just what is going to be achieved during this meeting. So this is super simple. You've got items to discuss, goals from last time, goals for the following time. Then any extra things that need to be talked about. When you have meetings like this and the employee knows they're coming up and the manager is planning for it, it saves time. You'll notice if you implement something like this, it will save time in the long run, because what inevitably happens is things get saved for the meeting. So there may be emergencies that go on where the manager's got to knock on the door and say, hey, what's going on with this? But for the most part, things can get saved for the meeting, which stops interruptions. It stops interruptions in the employee's workflow, and it also stops interruptions for the employee to the manager. So this tool or form like this, if you pull it from the library, you can use it in the control panel section. So that's where the documentation exists, but here in the control panel, I can go to my one-on-one employee meeting process, which is right here. And when I'm getting ready for a meeting, I can go and call it the agenda form, and I can fill it out. Here's one that I did as an example. So it's in the completed folder because I've completed it. This is for Bob. I hit go. And now I've got, the form that I filled out. And if you save them back to TouchStone, it saves them back in that completed folder. You can go back and look at what you did the last week and compare it to what you want to do this week. So in the agenda form, these are processes. These are things I want to discuss. So with Bob, I want to talk about referrals, the referral process. I want to talk about his cold calling. Things we talked about last week that I want to follow up on is getting his conversion rates up and completing the follow-up process. So rather than just creating a agenda form that's kind of vague and a lot of times filled with little nitpicky issues of things that had happened that week, as the manager, I'm focusing on the process. So if I know that Bob is not getting the referrals that other people are getting, then I know I need to go back to the referral process and retrain him and talk about it. I may choose a process from the job description just to highlight for that week. So let's talk about cold calling. How's that been going? Let's look at the process together. How are the steps working? What can we add to it? So around here, we have like a process a month. Sometimes it's one every 2 months, depending on the size of it. And so we'll go to the job descriptions, and basically every year, every 6 months, we've gone through one process. It's talked about in the department meeting. It's innovated. Individually, the employees discuss how it's working. So in this agenda for these one-on-one meetings and even in department meetings, you go through one process at a time and discuss it. What happens when you do that is it really makes it alive for the employees. You innovate all the time because you're talking about every process at least once a month. And it's easy to reference back to. So when dealing with employees and you have a problem with them, rather than saying, I'm really disappointed because I told you to get 5 referrals last week and you didn't, I'm concerned that you're not. So rather than making it personal like that, you go to the employee and say, let's talk about the referral process. This is the results that it's supposed to achieve. So how's it working for you? What doesn't make sense? What's hard for you? Let's see if we can change the process so that it works better for you. Let's go through the steps. So rather than making it about the employee and what they're doing wrong and how terrible they are, it's making everybody feel bad, we're focusing on the process and we're blaming that. We're saying, what's going on with this? Either it's not being followed in the way that it's supposed to, or maybe it just doesn't work for some reason. So let's re-look at it. So you can see where it's a different management style. We're managing processes. You can also think of the statistics of the process, the key indicators, the key performance indicators of every process, which also makes it much more tangible. Every single one of these processes within it can have results it's supposed to achieve. So sales follow-up. You follow up with a lead that says no, certain percentage of the time you should be able to bring it back on track. Request for information. The request for information needs to be sent out 24 hours after the request is made. Contracts and proposals. All contracts are to be completed in this way and sent out to every client and returned back within a day. Customer complaints. Every customer complaint should be fill out this form, step through this process, and ensure that every customer is satisfied in the end. So I'm talking about the results of each of these processes. The content of the process helps to achieve the result, but as the manager, I can look at that result, train the employee in it, and if after training and retraining they don't get it and they can't do it, then I know they're not right for the position. Or if they're super successful with it, then I can find even what are they doing that's even better than what we have here and innovate the process and make it better. So use the job descriptions as a management tool. Have them in place to start a path of developing the documentation. Even if you didn't have all the documentation done, this simple way to use a job description is still an effective management tool. It's still useful. I mean, even if I didn't have any of the documentation done in here, at least I have a list of what they're supposed to be doing, and I can discuss that with them. The more you talk about it, the more thought that goes into it, the easier it is to document anyway. So develop a plan to get the documentation down, and then use the job description as a management tool. Every week, a manager should be looking at the job descriptions of their subordinate positions. It's their job to make sure all of these people are getting their results. And if those results are achieved by documented processes, then they can't be a manager without it. So every week, all the time, they should be looking through these job descriptions, working with the employees on them, striving to get all the documentation done, having these one-on-one meetings, discussing every process, retraining, deciding how it could be better. You can see, or hopefully you can hear, by just having that simple focus, the manager will be more successful. So if a manager is having these one-on-one meetings with their employees every week, every 2 weeks, even every month, and in those meetings they're going through each process on a job description, they're talking about each one, what are they doing well, what are they not doing well, working to get the documentation done. This is happening for a whole year. Then we get to the end of the year, and it's time for a performance review. So there's a process in the library for performance reviews, which I think is fantastic. And basically this process describes how to create a performance review based on the job description in TouchStone. So it gives you these evaluation forms, and then you literally cut and paste the processes right into them. And there's it shows you, there's even a little video in here on export the job description to Word, you highlight the whole thing, paste it into the document, and then, or you can even paste it into the form tool. Here's one right here as an example. So here are the processes from the job description, referrals. So the job description, or the performance review becomes a rating on the job description, all the processes. And that makes sense, right? So all throughout the year, we're meeting on those processes. We're talking about how they're doing, how they could be better, innovating, retraining, redocumenting. And then at the end of the year, we're looking back at that whole year and saying, how did this employee do overall? How are they doing on the referral process? How are they doing on cold calling? Every employee deserves a performance review at the end of the year. They just do. It's not, management is not working if your employees aren't getting performance reviews. And the performance reviews need to be tangible. They need to be something that as a manager I can stand behind and say, this is why I gave you a 2. It's not some vague, this is how I was feeling today, so you're below average. Concretely, this is why I gave you a 2. All throughout the year, we've been talking about getting your conversion rate up to 50%. We've been focusing on this. We did X, Y, and Z with it, and I have all this in my employee one-on-one agenda forms. At the end of the year, you're still not there. I think I still have faith that you can get there, but you're not there. That's why you have a 2. I think the thing that managers hate about performance reviews is they are so subjective when you don't have processes in place. It's difficult to create one. You feel kind of yucky about it because either you just go overboard and give everyone excellent performance reviews, and then you're trying to justify your answers when you really don't remember, or it's just too hard to look back and see what the progress of the employee was because you didn't document any of it. These types of job descriptions make it very easy. When I do these, it's like I know what's happened with that employee all year, and it's very concrete because it's specifically related to the processes. So it takes like maybe 20 minutes to fill these out. And what's even better about it is the employee is not surprised. Like they know already because we've already talked about it. We talked about it the week before. We've been talking about it all year. So there's no surprises. And they're happy, or at least they understand what the ratings mean and what they're there for. So you can download this process from the library. It does also have, like general factors like this. And you may have some of these on other templates that you have, but this is kind of good to look at the end of the year, how dependable. And you could go back to, the employee lateness process, or if you're using the verbal and written warnings, of anything like that. So you can do some general factors. And then there's, things for how could management be more effective, things that information you want to get from the employee, what the goals are for the next year. So there are general factors here that you can put into your performance review. But really the heart of it is this. It's the evaluation of the process. So this can also be done in the control panel, just like everything else. So here's that performance evaluations process. I can go down and call up this form. So this is a blank form now, and these fields are all live. And then when you save it, it'll save this form back to TouchStone. Once it's saved, I can print it or export it to Word if I want to give it to the employee. But more importantly, it's saved in TouchStone. So even if I wanted to go back and look at the evaluation folder from last year, it's right here in this completed folder. I could just run a report and say, give me give me all the performance reviews for Bob, and I can see them for the last 5 years. And it's all inside of TouchStone. Another thing that's great about doing these performance evaluation forms inside of TouchStone, as well as those meeting agenda forms, and this happens all the time here, and I'm sure it happens in your business too. My manager, who's the president, this is my demo account, so it isn't real, but as it's structured here, the president may want to know what's happening over here, what's happening in this department. Did the manager do all the reviews? What are they discussing this week? How is this new salesperson that was hired 2 months ago doing? So the president can go and run a report and say, a management review report for the manager himself or for the specific employees, and say, okay, here's John. Let me see what's been happening with his sales to-do lists. Let me see what's been happening with his one-on-one meetings. So the information flow is great, because rather than the president knocking on this person's door and saying, did you do your reviews? So how's it going with Bob? So what have you been discussing this week? And are you on track? They can go and look. They can look at the agenda forms that I've filled out here. They can look at the performance reviews that I've done and see what's happening in the department, more or less. So going back to the beginning, build all your job descriptions by linking processes, have a nice list of what each position is accountable for, start a plan for the documentation if you haven't already. Put these in order of priority, decide who's going to document them, start to put in due dates, and then more importantly, get yourself or your managers to start using the job descriptions right away in some form or another. You can do this employee one-on-one meeting process where all you do is ask them, have a meeting once a week, once a month, once every 2 weeks. Plan out when the meetings are going to happen. Have a meeting with each employee. Sit down with them and go through the job description and talk about how those processes are going. Train them in what they need to be trained in. Discuss the documentation. Work on the documentation for that matter. But every 2 weeks, every month, go through those processes and talk about them. Start to train your managers and yourself to use these processes as management tools. It's going to bring all of them to life. It's going to highlight the deficits. It's going to make sure that they're up to date all the time. So start a process by which the managers are using these job descriptions as management tools. Then think about the performance review process. If you know your reviews are coming up or you don't have a process in place at all, you've never done reviews, think about implementing this because it just kind of closes the circle on it all. You're using these tools and processes, you're talking about them, you're training, and at the end of the year you're evaluating. Any questions? I've got a few questions I'm going to answer offline, but does anyone have any questions about anything we've talked about? No? Next week, we're going to start to discuss how to document. So get to a place, if you can, spend the hours that it's going to take between now and the next training session, or this next Thursday, to build at least one job description. Try to get to the result of building all your job descriptions if you can. Then we're going to discuss documenting, how to document. So we're going to go into a process, and I'm going to first talk about how to build work plans and checklists. That's going to be the first session. I'm going to talk about technically how to build them in TouchStone, but I'm going to also give some strategic information on what a good process looks like. What are some protocols for documenting? What are the best ways to document? And how to use these two tools effectively. The following week, we're going to cover the rest of the tools, so it's going to go in 2 sections. If you have employees that you want them to learn to document in TouchStone, or even not in TouchStone, next week would be a good time to pull them onto the training session, or at least let them listen to the recording. And they don't need to know how to do everything in TouchStone. Really all they need to know how to do is go to the org chart, access their job description, and build work plans, build checklists. So it would be a good time to bring anyone that you want to train on board. Someone's asking, how do you download from the library? So in case anyone else has the same question. Every function has its own library. So this has a library for strategic and managerial processes. This function has a library for everything related to marketing, advertising, and sales. This has a library related to operations, production, service, delivering products or services. And this has a library related to admin, finance, HR, IT. So go to the function and go up here where it says Add from Process Library. Most TouchStone users will have a general process library, and then you have access to these 2 industry-specific libraries. If you have a coach or what we call reseller, someone who you purchase TouchStone through, you may have a 3rd or 4th library, because a lot of our resellers will have their own libraries. So if you see multiple libraries, you probably recognize either like your business mentor or whoever turns you on to TouchStone, you'll see their library. But for the most part, you want to go to this general library. So here I'm seeing a list of all the processes from the library. Some of these are grayed out because these are already in my account. So if you see a process that you want from the library, you select it, You go up here and say which subfunction you want that process in, and then you just hit Save at the bottom. So you can pull multiple processes at a time if you want, but just know that you can only choose one subfunction to put them in. But you can obviously reorder them. You can drag and drop to the different subfunctions. So that's how you add from the library. Here's that process I just added. If you delete a library process, so say you pull a process and then you decide you don't want it, or you don't want it right away, you delete all the tools inside of it, it'll turn red, and then you can drag it to the delete folder right here and delete it. It will then put it back into the library. So once you pull a process over, if you decide you don't want it, delete it, it goes back into the library, and then you can pull it down later if you want. So the library processes are fantastic. They're a good way to kind of get a head start. They do need to be customized, though. You do need to go into them and actually make them your own. And I think the number one thing, in addition to how to use the library, that I want to say is don't just pull everything over because you're all excited about it. Really make sure that you take what you know you're going to document and use within, say, 6 months. If you don't think you're going to get to documenting it and you're not sure you're really going to use it because it's not that big of a priority right now, leave it in the library. Delete it, put it back into the library, and go get it later. Because the last thing you want to do is download everything and then just have it sitting there cluttering up your system and making it more confusing than it needs to be. Okay, so next time we're going to talk specifically about how to document the process, starting with work plans and checklists. And thanks for coming, everybody. For those of you who have questions that I haven't answered, I'm going to answer those right now. Thanks for coming. Bye-bye.